And before we proceed, we have a opening statement just to sum up previous hearings as well as putting in context the agenda for this for today's hearing. So this meeting is hereby called to order. We are resuming the Constitutional Amendments Committee hearing. We also place on record the presence of our Minority Leader, Senator Drilon. And with our opening statement, tatagalogin ko po, sa kasagsagan ng COVID nitong nakaarang araw, may surge din ng disinformation na kumakalat. May mga sumisira o sinisiraan ang ilang mga programa ng mga volunteer health workers na kumakausap at nagbibigay ng konsultasyon para makahanap o makapagbigay ng medical advice sa ating mga kababayan na natatakot pumunta sa ospital o kaya'y nahihirapan dahil sa ilang mga karamdaman. Meron ding nagkakalat ng mga meme na pang-gather lang daw ng personal na impormasyon ng mga botante itong tulong na ito. Meron din ganyang nangyaring disinformation sa relief operations mismo sa Siargao dahil sa bagyong Odette. Mga nagpapakalat na hindi raw binibigyan ang mga relief goods. Noong mga araw na yon, karamihan po ng mga tao sa Siargao ay apektado, pati po ang mga taong gobyerno. At ang konting mga public servants na nakatutok sa pagre-repack ng mga natatanggap na relief goods ay nabahala pa ng may nagkalat at nambubuyo sa ating mga kababayan na sugurin daw at i-loot yung repacking area. Hindi ito katanggap-tanggap. Walang puso ang nagpapakalat ng peking balita habang may krisis. This is wrong. Ganito kasama ang kasinungalingan. Apektado ang kalusugan at kaligtasan nating lahat, ang kaban ng bayan at ang kaayusan ng ating lipunan. Masama na nga ang sitwasyon, sinasamantala pa ang pagkadesperado ng ating mga kababayan sa mga pakalat ng mga paninira. This is our third hearing on disinformation. The goal of the hearing is to expose the disinformation ecosystem and find solutions, whether legislative, executive, or a combination of both, as well as private sector participation. Nung una, sa unang hearing, sinabi ni Ellen Tordesillas ng Vera Files na ang gobyerno ang isa sa mga malaking source ng nagpapakalat ng disinformation. Totoo po yan sa ating kaso mismo na ilang linggo nang sinisisi sa ilang mga nangyayari sa ating bansa. Nung ikalawang hearing, sinabi naman ni Dr. Jonathan Ong ng University of Massachusetts Amherst na fake names work both ways. Sa Me Too movement halimbawa at Black Lives Matter movement sa US, marami ang namomobilisa dahil sa mga whistleblowers na may pseudonym. Parang si Laong Laan o kaya Dimasalang o kaya si Plaridel nung panahon ni Dr. Rizal, Jose Rizal. Ngayong third hearing, kasama natin si Maria Ressa, ang kauna-unahang Pilipino na nakatanggap ng Nobel Peace Prize, ay isa sa pinaka-trolled na tao sa ating bansa. Malalaman natin sa kanya ang sagot sa ilang tanong tungkol sa ecosystem ng disinformation. Sino ang mga players? Bukod sa mga platform owners, sino pa ang mga nakikinabang dito? Ano ang relasyon ng mga players sa isa't isa? Paano sila pwedeng i-regulate? Lalo na kung ang gobyerno na ang magpapatupad ng batas, ang pasimuno ng kasinungalingan. Sa mga taga-Facebook at Google at sa mga advertising professionals, ilan ang fake accounts? Ilan ang gumagawa ng fake content? Ano ang ginagawa ng Facebook halimbawa sa Twin Mark noong 2019 pagkatapos ng eleksyon? Ang impormasyon ay 200 mga account ng Twin Mark ang tinanggal o kaya sinuspinde o kaya ay dine-activate. Ano ang ginagawa nito ngayon sa paparating na eleksyon? Dumadami ba ulit ang merong inauthentic behavior? Ano ang mga bagong paraan ng pagpakalat nila ng fake news? Paano ito sinasagot ng Meta o Facebook at ng Google? Gusto rin natin malaman, how much harm has this infodemic caused? If it has not been quantified, who can measure the cost to our mental health, both as individuals and as a community and society? Where are the items that should be placed, ika nga, on the tab? Kailangan malaman ang mga yan para malaman din natin kung sino ang mananagot at sisingilin at kung paano ang penalty na ilalagay sa gagawin ng nating mga batas o kaya paano pa sa sektor sa pribadong sektor, paano pa papalakasin ang self-regulation. Various sites and apps have transformed the way we understand and experience crime and victimization. Merong mga nambibiktima ng krimen, di pa ganoong kalinaw o kriminal na di pa natutukoy. Ano ang pinapatay ng infodemic na ito? Ang katotohanan. At pagpatay na ang katotohanan, paano pa natin malalaman kung ano ang totoo sa hindi totoo, sa kasinungalingan at sa katotohanan? Paano tayo magpapasya ng maayos kung kasinungalingan ang basihan ng ating pagpapasya? While we are not looking, sabi nga nila, while we were not looking, we the people are slowly being canceled to Generation Z language. Ipagpapatuloy po natin pag-uusapan hindi lang ang kultura ng kabastusan, masamang ugali, pagsisinungaling, malademonyong kilos at salita ng ilang mga tao sa internet, mga kilos at salitang ang layo sa pagiging Pilipino, mga kilos at salita na hindi tinuturo sa atin nung tayo pa ay mga estudyante mula elementary at high school. Mga kilos at salitang ayaw nating gayahin at gayahin ng ating mga anak. Infodemic threatens the very fiber of our decency as a people. The situation has gone so very bad that even the traditionally quiet community of 18 business groups issued a statement against disinformation and hate speech, warning against lies, personal attacks, trolling, misogyny, red tagging that sometimes put people at risk of physical harm. Nababahala ang mga grupo na ito na lalala pa ang infodemic sa darating na halalan at papatay sa tiwala at pagkakaisa na kailangan natin para makabangon sa hagupit ng pandemya. Ika nga, nung 18 business groups, and I quote, "We watch with alarm how this abuse has spiked during this election season. We fear the damage may be long-lasting." Aaminin ko, ako mismo hindi techie, tulad ng maraming gumagamit ng internet at social media. Maliit na bahagi lang ng virtual universe ang naintindihan ko. Dahil ito ay isang hearing in aid of legislation, nais natin malaman kung paano masusugpo itong infodemic sa pamamagitan ng batas. We must have laws that are up to date, responsive to the needs of the times, foolproof as best as it can be against the ingenious minds of criminals. Ika nga. Marami pang kailangan alamin. Granted that the issue of propaganda to sow erroneous belief, confusion, and division is as old as society, but we are now on new territory. To borrow the term from one of the experts in the field, today, with digital technology, unlike before, unprecedented scale, speed, and scope ang kayang abutin ng digital technology. We have to craft new laws or legislation cognizant of the new complications that technology poses. Sama-sama po nating iilawan ang madilim na mundo ng infodemic. As we grapple for sharper weapons to defeat the night, we shall remember that our torches are puny when alone. Light shines brightest when all the torches stand together in firm defiance of evil. In this public hearing, we will all be, hopefully, soldiers of the light. Magandang umaga sa kanilang lahat. Before I go into the administrative matters, we would like to know if our minority leader has a opening statement for today's hearing.
None, Your Honor. I associate myself with the statements made by the chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minority Leader. And before I turn over to our committee secretary, just the following administrative matters. We are in receipt of the written position paper of the Presidential Communication Operations Office, PCOO, dated 11 January 2022, signed by Attorney Joseph Adrian Llames. I assume he is signing this with the authority of his secretary. It would have been best that the position paper, in fact, was signed by Secretary Andanar. But I think Undersecretary Ablan is here, so we will hear from him too. We also are in receipt of the Media Specialist Association of the Philippines statement, MSAP. We have invited them twice. I understand finally they are here. We will go back to MSAP later. We are also in receipt of a letter of Mr. Nicanor Gabonada Jr., who has requested more time for him to be able to prepare his presentation for this committee. His request is reasonable, and we have granted him more time, and we are looking forward to his attendance in the next hearing. We are also in receipt of the letter of Ogilvy, representing Rockwell Land, who we have invited to this hearing. For the record, it is signed by a representative, Adeline Santa Ana, the account director. And we have also the letter position paper of the public affairs, signed by the public affairs officer of Shopee, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. or Miss Jamie Han Segovia from Shopee. And we also have the statement from Lazada on our resolution. And again, before we turn this over to our secretary to acknowledge the presence of our resource persons, we would also like to place on record that we had invited MSAP 3 times. Are they here today? May the committee secretary inform this representation, the chairman. Is MSAP here today?
Yes, sir. MSAP is virtually present today.
Yes, thank you. On the matter of MSAP, it can be recalled that we had invited them twice and they had been unable to attend, and so we had to issue a subpoena. We are thankful they are here today, and that, but we are informed that the outgoing president is on sick leave. Is that correct? And therefore he cannot attend today's hearing. Can we be clarified?
Your Honor, Ms. B. Ubalde, the MSAP Secretariat, informed this committee yesterday that Mr. De Castro was on sick leave since Thursday.
Yes. Well, we would like, well, we hope he will feel better and that he will be able to attend the next hearing. We'd like to place on record, no, that we have been getting different signals from MSAP. In the first hearing, the information relayed to us informally was that because they had no expertise in cybercrime laws, that they declined to attend. That was the first explanation given to us informally. After which, the second explanation was that the email that the committee secretary sent to Mr. De Castro ended up in the spam or junk mail, and that they apologized for this. So which is which? Is it the cybercrime, lack of expertise in cybercrime laws, or is it because the invitation went to the junk mail folder? And today we now hear that, or we are informed again informally, or at least verbally, or through the phone, that he is on sick leave. We sincerely wish him well. We do not want. We wish he will have a speedy recovery. but we would also like to direct the Secretariat to inform him that we would like to have a written explanation. Uh, Kasi puro informal. It's all through verbal, etc. For the, you know, and he is not here again today. Although, of course, like I said earlier, the MSAP is here today. He is the outgoing president, if I'm not mistaken, and the incoming president is here with us today. But out of respect for our processes in this hearing, we would like to have a written explanation of precisely why he has been unable to attend all these three past hearings. We hope he will understand. You know, this is not for me, this is not for anyone else, but it is out of respect for the committee and the Senate as an institution. On the third hearing, he is still absent, but he has given us a explanation that he is on sick leave, so we will take it as that. But we would appreciate a written explanation of his absence for the last three hearings. With that, we can now proceed. I turn over the floor to our committee secretary so that we can proceed with the items in the agenda. You have the floor.
Good morning, Your Honor. The confirmed resource persons who attended this hearing are the following: Ms. Anna Chua Norbert, Board Secretary, and Attorney Augusto Tito Bundang, Legal Advisor for 4A's Philippines; Attorney Rudolph Steve Hularbal, Legal Counsel, Ad Standards Council or ASC; Ms. May Yao Kosai, President for 2022; Mr. Marvin Q. Lim, President 2021 for the Philippine Association of National Advertisers or PANA; Ms. Yves Gonzalez for Government Affairs of Google Philippines; Mr. Roy Tan, Head of Politics and Government, and Mr. Robert Abrams, Manager, Law Enforcement of Meta, formerly Facebook; Ms. Maria Ressa from Rappler; Attorney Jem Hans Segovia, Public Affairs for Shopee; Mr. Neil Trinidad, Chief Marketing Officer, Marketing Department of Lazada, together with Attorney Hannah Kayla Garcia for Government Affairs, and Norman Roland Ocana III, Manager, Government Affairs; Attorney Antony Pauline Pascual, State Counsel, Office of Cybercrime from the DOJ; Undersecretary Christian Ablan of PCOO, together with ASEC Omar Romero for Legal Affairs, and Attorney Joseph Adrian Llames, Senior Legislative Liaison Officer. From Rockwell Land Corporation, Attorney Maria Fe Caroline Pinoy, General Counsel, and Ms. Samantha Joyce Castillo, Vice President, Marketing, Residential and Retail Development. For Media Specialists Association of the Philippines or MSAP, Mr. Jamie De Guzman, President, and Mr. Adel Raymond Tuason, Vice President, Agency Management Wavemaker, and Memo Moreno, MSAT Board Member, former Digital Lead. That is all, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. We can now proceed with the flow of the hearing by the presentations as we have done before. We will have Maria of Rappler, Maria Ressa, to give her 5 to 7 minute presentation. You have the floor, Maria, and congratulations again. I haven't seen you personally, and I'm seeing you for the first time online. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations, and thank you for giving us the country the honor and the prestige. And thank you for your commitment to the truth and to responsible investigative journalism. You have the floor, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for inviting me to come speak to you about a topic that I have become obsessed with since 2016. First, let me say, honorable senators, you're also nice to see you and the guests. Let me start with like 4 slides, I think, and then please just tell me when my 5 minutes are up or 7 minutes are up, and then I can just answer the questions that you have. So let me share the presentation. First of all, this is a slide from the Salant lecture, which I gave in Harvard in November last year. And what I would hope to do is I will send you the link because I think there's far more that's there. It tells you why, it tells you how, it tells you how these repeated, how information operations. Because most people stop and think only of like the little content they see that is half of a lie. They think it's just someone's mistake. But in the end, this is about power. It is about power and money, and it is using micro targeting and the weaknesses of our biology to manipulate us. And, what I hope to do is to cut across the divide in our society and actually first show you where we can go, a possible worst case scenario, where it isn't just about gaining power or losing power, but actually how this system can actually bring down a functioning democracy much older than we are, with much stronger institutions, and bring violence to its center. And this is January 6th in the United States is what I'm showing you here. But I want to show you the methodology of how that happened. This is research by the Election Integrity Partnership. It is academics working in the United States that includes different universities. I will send you the link for that as well. But let me show you a very familiar methodology, right? So what happened on January 6th? President Trump, former President Trump, lost the elections, and yet he claimed not to have lost the elections. He claimed a conspiracy theory, right? And using social media had seeded the way into this, and that ended in violence. So think about it like this. How many times have Filipino politicians, candidates who have lost elections, said that they were robbed? That's kind of pretty normal in the Philippines, but now put it in the age of disinformation. If you have an expert who knows how to do this, it can lead to violence. So disinformation is directly connected to elections, which is directly connected to national security. Here's what happened in the United States, right? This violence, the conspiracy theory of election fraud, stop the steal, hashtag stop the steal, was actually seeded a year earlier in August 2019. And it was seeded on many kind of offshoot groups, but RT was the one that was identified by the academic groups. It was Russia Today, right? The very same group, by the way, that is that PCOO has partnered with to train journalists, supposedly, and to train their own groups, right? RT is a known propaganda unit, and it has been flagged for lies. That was August 20th. They introduced the narrative. And then you have later
August
Steve
19.
Bannon,
August 19.
August 2019,
Yes.
right? August 2019, so a year earlier. How did it get mainstreamed? Well, Steve Bannon on YouTube then takes that narrative and it spreads. And this is in August of 2020, a year later. And then after that, Tucker Carlson of Fox picks it up. The YouTube video is seeded in different closed pages, so that mainstreams it. And then Tucker Carlson brings it to mainstream media. And then you have the super spreaders. So by October 2020, QAnon, which by the way has a link to the Philippines, right? Almost every one of these groups had some kind of link to the Philippines. I'd be happy to supply you with that. And on October 7th, 2020, QAnon drops it. It spreads. QAnon has now been taken down by the social media platforms. And then it comes top down from President Trump. He calls people out, and we have violence on January 6th. The United States is still dealing with these implications. And the reason why I'm so afraid of this is because as the bureau chief in Indonesia, before the age of social media, when there was Muslim Christian violence or ethnic violence, that it wasn't violence at that point, but it's very flammable. And when you do that, which is exactly what informations do, when you throw a match in a very flammable environment, it becomes impossible to control. So I think this is, where these disinformation becomes a scorched earth policy. Let me show you a study by UNESCO and the International Center for Journalists that looked at the attacks, now looking at it as big data against me. And I think many of you here have also gone through this, but this was released last year by UNESCO, done with the International Center for Journalists, looking at attacks against women journalists. But, you take it further, women politicians have also been inordinately attacked in the Philippines. Our data shows that women are attacked at least 10 times more than men. So there is gendered disinformation. But these things are very interesting, the statistics. 73% of women journalists experience online abuse, 25% physical threats of physical violence, and then 20% actually that violence moved into the real world. I think I just want to emphasize how online violence is real world violence, right? And I'll explain more about that later. Here's the nature of the attacks against me. This was done again by UNESCO. 60% of the online violence was aimed to try to tear down my credibility, right? This is it is the end goal of all of this in Russian disinformation. It came from Disinformation. The end goal is to make you distrust everything. Because if you don't trust anything, then you cannot act. This is how democracies fail. 40% of the attacks are personal. So 60% are meant to tear down credibility. 40% were meant to tear down my spirit. And then this is the last slide I'll show you. When did it happen? Well, anytime we did an investigation, anytime we exposed wrongdoing, anytime we showed corruption, right? So these are orchestrated, and I think this is part of what the platforms have to deal with. I just want to end with something you would have heard me say, and again I'll send the link for the entire presentation. But there's one phrase that captures the problem we have at this time, and I will show you the data from the Philippines if you want, because I think that's what makes our research unique, because we were Facebook partners, because we were aware very early on in 2016. Rappler, I believe, was the first globally to actually come out with series on how Facebook algorithms impact democracy. That was a piece I wrote in 2016 that triggered the attacks against me. So the one phrase for us today is from American biologist E.O. Wilson, biologist, right? He looked at emergent behavior. He said that we're facing Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And what I mean when I say that social media has become a behavior modification system is it's not about the content anymore. It's essentially experimenting on us in real time with disastrous consequences. It's really good to see someone from Facebook here because Facebook is now the world's largest distributor of news, and yet studies have shown that lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further than the really boring facts. So the reality is the platforms that deliver the facts to you are biased against facts, they're biased against journalists, they are by design dividing us and radicalizing us. So here in the Philippines, I mean, a very easy one, and I think you probably would have seen me do this. I feel like, you know, Sisyphus, because I've been saying this for almost 6 years, right? A technical decision, whether you're pro or anti Duterte, right? But I will say that our data is very clear, and I will also send you links in the chat that will show you who was behind information operations. You mentioned Nick Gabunada, who's a former colleague. We went over, we overlapped a little bit in ABS-CBN, but he also has the unique distinction in 2019 when the networks were taken down and when he was named by Facebook. He's the only private person that was named by Facebook at that point in time. So what happened? So here's a technical decision. Let me just show you how something very simple, how an algorithm that was tested for optimization by all social media platforms, which is how do they recommend you grow your Facebook page or your accounts, right? They use an algorithm called friends of friends, meaning that, they've realized the most efficient way through A/B testing is to recommend a friend of your friend to you. And then when you click that, they grow, right? So in 2016, after President Duterte used social media to help him get elected, actually that Rappler lauded that there was this use of social media. We just didn't realize where it would lead. This Friends of Friends algorithm, along with President Duterte's divisive us against them rhetoric, did this, right? So in 2016, in May 2016, we were all in the middle. And then what happened was we agreed on the facts. But if you're pro Duterte, then what happened is that you moved further left. This is because of the algorithms of recommendation for growth. And if you're anti Duterte, you move further. Sorry, if you're pro Duterte, you move further right. Anti Duterte, you move further left. That's say 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, right? Over time. And over time, that chasm grew. The algorithms also radicalize, and you can see this in a lot of research coming from the West. There's the work of Renee DeResta, who she looked at do-it-yourself moms on Facebook. They formed a group to make their own baby food. But if you were in that group, Facebook recommended you join anti-vax groups. And if you clicked on their recommendation, then the next one you got was for QAnon. This is the impact of a business model Shoshana Zuboff called surveillance capitalism, when a system gathers your data, knows you better than you know yourself, and then serves your most vulnerable moment to a message, to a company, that's the new advertising, or to a government, the new propaganda. I will just send the link so that I can answer your questions. I think the last thing that I would just flag is that this isn't just each of our countries, right? In every country now, populist politicians are using what used to be marketing, micro-targeting processes to gain political power. But the problem is that what happens when they become weapons of war? When it becomes information warfare turned on the people. And I guess this is where I'll point you to 2014 in Crimea, when Russian disinformation operations worked hand in hand with a speech of the Russian foreign minister at the United Nations. A fake account mimicking a day earlier, almost word for word, what the foreign minister said. And again, I can send you a link to that. But essentially, it changed. It allowed for the annexation in the 21st century of Crimea, right? So the last thing, Russian disinformation, where it all came from. This is a quote from former KGB chairman Yuri Andropov. The word is disinformatsiya, right? Disinformation works like cocaine, he said. If you sniff once or twice, it may not change your life. If you use it every day, it will make you into an addict, a different man. And then what happened, and that's the end of the quote, Russia included it in the Gerasimov doctrine and became part of information operations of the Russian military doctrine. And this is a quote from the Russian military doctrine. Integrated employment of military force and political, economic, informational, or other non-military measures implemented with a wide use of the protest potential of the population. So it's information warfare, except when you, a populist politician, uses it against your people, you are essentially using a scorched earth policy that takes away our future and our ability to choose our leaders.
Thank you, Maria, for your presentation. Unless Senator Drilon has some questions, I can go ahead. Go ahead, Senator Drilon. Okay. Well, actually, my questions, a few questions would be, or one or two questions is, so what do we do?
Yeah, I have no questions at this point.
Yes. So, Maria, having been involved in this advocacy for many years now, what are the first few things that have to be done?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for the question. So first of all, we've been dealing with this problem since 2016. And at the beginning, we thought that enlightened self-interest would help. Like maybe the platforms didn't know about it, so we shared the data with them. As you know, Rappler remains a Facebook partner. We're partners also with the Google News Initiative and Twitter, right? So because we believe technology is the future, but now you need technology to fight technology. The short answer now for you is that it requires governments to step in. In the Nobel lecture, I talked about how an atom bomb exploded in our information ecosystem. That's essentially what happened. Because if you don't have facts, which is where we are today, facts are debatable. If you don't have facts, you can't have truth. If you don't have truth, you can't have trust. Without that, you have no democracy and you can't actually work together, right? In anything, including climate change and all the other parts. So what are the things to do? Well, in the West right now, because these are American companies, that's the irony. American companies that should have American values are the ones that are actually enabling the rise of fascism globally. And we're seeing this. So what is happening? In Europe, the EU has the Democracy Action Plan, where they actually have legislation. I had testified last year in one of the hearings, but their legislation has already passed last December, one of the committees, and it is now going through Parliament. This is the Digital Markets Act. This is the Digital Services Act. So they're two underneath the European Democracy Action Plan. The UK has its online harms bill, and the US has attorney generals in different states have filed cases along with other groups against Facebook. Again, I still see great opportunity to do great good for these platforms, which is why we work with them. But the debate in the US is on Section 230, which is the clause, it's a 1996 law that essentially allows these platforms to act like publishers without the constraints or liability of publishers. And I guess when you ask me, what can we do in the Philippines? Well, the Philippines has no Section 230.
Yeah.
And in many ways, I guess this other part, right? Because we're out of time. If we don't have integrity of facts, we will not have integrity of elections. And again, if you look at every study of fascism globally, you go back to history, they first tear down the facts. So once we're at this point, you have to look at what existing laws do we already have that can actually put guardrails on this godlike technology. Um, Again, that's as far as we've gotten. I think that we've done the research. I will send links here of all of the different things we've shown you, how we've been manipulated. We've shown you how the government has used information operations to deal with attacks on its performance. Actually, I wouldn't even call them attacks. I would call them reports on their performance. Something very simple, like the SEA Games. And I'll put that link here in our chat. And how what happens is when you do the report, you're attacked instead of actually having any kind of accountability or even acknowledgement. This has to stop because it tears apart the very foundation of the Philippine Constitution, which is all about checks and balances.
I think, Maria, one of the major concerns and that has been identified is the inauthentic behavior. So how do you intervene so that you can put an end to inauthentic behavior? I mean, that's it's a huge concern, and my understanding is all the platforms are moving towards addressing precisely inauthentic behavior. So how do you fast track that? Because it's not just legislation, that's one aspect of it, but the digital giants are in the best position at this point to determine inauthentic behavior and therefore act upon it or act on it.
I think, sir, you have to go beyond inauthentic behavior. I think that we have to look at even the words the platform used to evade accountability and liability, right? At the beginning, it was coordinated inauthentic behavior. That was the way they looked at it. Coordinated inauthentic behavior, essentially mob rule, right? So, for example, and this is from personal experience, if I wrote when I wrote the report on Facebook, and how its algorithms were harmful to democracy, all of a sudden I got attacked. And those facts remain. And since 2016, it's only gotten worse. And now with Francis Haugen's whistleblower testimony and the more than 10,000 pages of internal documents that have been released, we now know that the platform's algorithms, that both of distribution and amplification, have been harmful to each of its users, especially children, right? So it's not just CIB, it is also online harms, which is why I would bring you to the UK's draft legislation, and I can send a copy of that. But online harms goes to far more than coordinated, than inauthentic behavior.
Yeah.
Because what if they're real people attacking you with lies, right?
Yeah.
And then they do it so frequently, and they do it with an army, paid or not paid, that then aim to stifle you. And I think many of you here have been targets of these information operations as well.
Yeah. Yes. True. Okay. Unless we will hold on to the questions. We'll also give our other resource persons an opportunity to present their position papers. But Maria, anytime you feel like commenting or providing insights, please feel free. And anyone else, in fact, among the resource persons. So we will now proceed with the presentation. Before that, we did present previously a video in terms of the context of advertising involved in fake news or sites that are notorious for disinformation. We can now proceed with, and the reason why they're here is because they were identified as one of those, a number of those companies whose ads were coming out in these news sites that have since been taken down by Google. So we have Lazada. May we call on the Lazada representative to make its presentation?
Good morning. Honorable Chairperson, Senator Francis Pangilinan, Honorable Senator Drilon, Honorable Committee of the members of the State Senate Committee on the Constitutional Amendments and Revision Codes, Senator Nancy Binay, Senator Sonny Angara, Senator Amy Marcos, Committee Secretary, Attorney Maria Cecilia Mactal, distinguished guests, good morning. Before everything else, thank you for still inviting Lazada to be a resource speaker in today's committee hearing, despite our absence in the previous hearings. We only learned about the invitations after the last hearing, Your Honor, so thank you. Similar to the other resource persons who attended before us, Lazada is also an advertiser. Through our partner media agencies, we buy ad space on traditional media and on digital platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, TikTok, amongst others. We rely on our digital platform partners like Meta and Google to ensure that our ads are placed in accordance with Lazada's brand safety guidelines. Our brand safety guidelines includes, amongst others, exclusions of potentially libelous content and fake news. During instances where our ads appear in content that is not aligned with these brand safety guidelines, we ask that our ads be removed immediately after we become aware of the said instances. We continue to ask our partner digital platforms to continue their efforts on screening libelous content and fake news to make the digital ecosystem safer for all. On our end, Lazada shall continue to work with our partner media agencies and our digital platform partners in helping ensure that our ads do not appear next to libelous content and fake news. In response to the ads that appeared in the videos presented in the last committee hearing, Lazada has already requested our digital platform partners to remove them. Thank you very much, Your Honors.
Thank you, Mr. Trinidad, for the position paper. Maybe later. Yes, Senator Drilon, you have a question? You're muted. Can you unmute your...
Yeah, there you are. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much to our resource persons. So far, Maria Reza has made a very, very good presentation. I assume she's talking from experience, being the victim of the trolls, etc. Maria, you have been exposed to this anomaly. Is there any legislation that you can suggest that we enact in order to solve partially, or you know, we cannot totally prevent this? I can understand that, but is there a way by which we can at least minimize it? For example, government officials would post on Facebook that senators are cardinals of the NPA, you know, identifying myself, Senator Po, Senator Gatsalian, Senator Gutierrez, Senator Villanueva, that we are cardinals of the NPA simply because we oppose the NTF-LCAC budget. You know, there is this Director General of the Public Information Agency, Under Secretary Kualuping, who doesn't care. He just uses the social media to hit everyone. Now, so I'll ask a general question, Maria. Having been exposed to these practices, is there anything that we can do by legislation?
Senator Drilon, thank you so much for the question. And, you know, what you're describing is impunity. Part of the reason it has now continued and grown is because the first people who did it got away with it and then were empowered to do it. And here's the other part, the algorithms of distribution actually rewarded them for it because, you know, this is a study, I'll put in the link, but as early as 2018, we know that lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further on social media because facts are kind of boring. So what can we do? Far be it from me to say, but the easy one is, the question I always have is, since we don't have Section 230, are they not just a publishing platform?
Was that we don't have section? Did I hear you? Can you have
Yes. in the United States, part of the reason that the social media platforms, that the tech platforms are able to move forward without any accountability or liability for content for information operations is because there's a law in 1996 that was passed, and the Section 230 gives them cover. But in the Philippines, we actually don't. And I think,
Yes, just for purposes of placing it on record, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act,
Correct.
No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. So, in other words, this refers to Facebook, Google, etc., right? That they
the publisher is exempted from any liability, whereas in traditional media, the publisher is made responsible because theoretically they have control over the media outlets, particular newspapers or radio, etc. But in social media, the platform owners are not held responsible. They're not considered as publishers. Are you saying that if that one remedy is to consider them as publishers?
It's certainly something that I have thought about because in the end, so we also build our own tech, right? And I'll give you an example where we acted like a tech platform, but then our journalism standards and ethics got in the way and we took something down. In 2014 to 2015, we actually built a blogging platform on top of Rappler's platform. It's called X, meaning anyone can go on Rappler's platform and they can then, like on Facebook or Google or Blogger, they can then put whatever they want, right? They can use the platform. When they use that platform, they gain our domain authority. Well, we kept it going until I believe it was the 2016 elections when we started seeing. So I thought we would have a problem with pornography, but that wasn't the case. Actually, it wasn't pornography that was a problem. It was politics that was a problem. And when we realized that the X was being used as a platform, in fact, many of the known disinformation peddlers actually got their start on X, right? So once we realized that, what we did, despite the increased engagement and revenues, we took X down because it was bad for the information ecosystem. So the question really for the Senate and for Filipino authorities is who is responsible for gatekeeping? Because for a long time, journalists were responsible for that, and you could hold us liable, right? Imagine if, like a television network, imagine if when we had the power of television, we could do whatever we wanted. That wasn't the case, but that's essentially the case now with this new, far more powerful technology.
television stations have they have to get a franchise from government, so you regulate them in that regard. I don't think the Facebook or Google go through such scrutiny. So it's that may be one area. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would just say one caution in terms of regulation is something that the platforms bring up all the time, which is freedom of speech, freedom of expression, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time, you will see Facebook. Since you're here, Rob, I will use you as you will see Facebook or Mark Zuckerberg say that because they believe in freedom of speech, that they can't do anything or they will do very little. But the problem is that freedom of speech, this is not a freedom of speech issue. It's actually a freedom of distribution. It's a freedom of amplification, right? So you can what happens is when you look at it as a freedom of speech issue, you look at the content, which is so so 20th century. When you only look at the content, you get lost because it's not about the content, it's about the operating system run by algorithms of amplification.
Yeah.
What governs those algorithms? And then finally, the last part is all the way upstream is the actual business model of the platforms. It's called Surveillance Capitalism, 750-page book by Shoshana Zuboff, but I can put in a summary of it. But what it does is all of these problems that we've been talking about, content moderation, privacy, antitrust, they all come up to who owns our data, right? Who owns, because essentially our private lives atomized when we post on Facebook or YouTube, or all of that data is harnessed by machine learning, which builds a model of us that knows us more than we know ourselves. Then AI, artificial intelligence, comes in, and that, what the platforms say is that they own our data. And that is a hotly debated issue globally. So these are all, where are you going to intervene? Don't intervene in the content because then you can actually be accused of censorship. But if you go to the algorithms of amplification, because everyone can say what they think, but what your neighbor said never reaches broadcast scale until today, because there have been no guardrails on the distribution of lies.
So, Riza, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
did I hear you correctly that we should consider the online platform as the publisher, so that with that classification, the online platform would incur the same liability as a publisher in print media or television? Because right now, as you have cited, Section 230 of a law passed in 1996 does not consider them as publisher. And therefore, under the freedom of speech protection, you get all kinds of abuses. I have no, don't get me wrong. Yes, we should defend the freedom of speech, but as in any freedom, there must be responsibility. And in the case that we are in the situation that we are today, because the online platform is not considered as a publisher, they, everybody could just take on the platform and libel everyone. That's a problem. In other words, that's why you have trolls. You don't know who they are. So how can you exercise your remedies when you don't even know who they are? And that is why the only remedy that some people have suggested, the retired Justice Antonio Carpio, in the hearing here, said that he recommends that the online platform be considered as the publisher, and that the platform should disclose the real identities. These are, we're grappling with solutions here. These are some of the solutions suggested, and I would like to present this to you for your comment.
Senator Drilon, I believe, like Francis Haugen, that Facebook can do better and will do better in the future. Must, for all of our, and it's not just Facebook, right? YouTube has also radicalized that. There's a lot of studies that show that when you click on one video, it keeps you on by giving you more radical content. So I'm not so sure I agree with the idea of stripping away anonymity. In our country, it's not so. Let me rephrase it this way. We cannot wait for the EU or the United States to actually put guardrails in place, because our elections are the first of this year's, among the first. It's us and Hungary, followed by Kenya, France. The US has its own election. So every single country will have the same problem. In our country, what can we do, right? And in that case, we don't have Section 230. So the quick solution would be to actually hold the platforms accountable for what they spread, what they allow to spread. And when you do that, I bet you that you would automatically see a shrinking of information operations. The other thing, though, is I don't know what impact that would have on lesser known candidates. Because what we know for sure, and this is something that we've seen starting in 2014 and 2015, I put a link here to the disinformation, the operations of the Marcos family. It's very well documented in there. There is a lot of data that supports that. We've mapped the networks. So real people now believe the lies. We have a few months before elections. How are you going to change that? And this is part of, I think, what these technology platforms have done globally. It's not just in the Philippines.
Yeah. Go. You still have other follow-up questions, Senator Drilon, please?
No, well, one other drawback that we have, one other difficulty that we have, is the anonymity. The platform users, the trolls, remain anonymous. Therefore, in effect, they have no responsibility. I do not know if making the online platform operators as the publisher would compel them to at least know the real identity of these trolls. What do you think, yes, Maria?
Senator, so, sir,
Maria?
what the platforms do know are things that we don't see, the device, for example, other identifying marks, but they could certainly very easily, because as a policy, they ask us to register. And so starting to actually enforce their registration is a good point, so that you have, I believe you've already seen all the troll farms or companies like Cambridge Analytica, where they could just mass produce fake accounts. Well, a lot of that now has been dealt with to a degree, but what hasn't been dealt with is what will require a lot more investment on the platform's part, which is to actually make sure that the people who are there are accountable for what they do. Because there are a lot of policies they have that aren't enforced, right? And then the cloak that will be used is, well, it's there's too many. We have almost 3 billion accounts, and my response to that always is, and so why do you have 3 billion accounts? Again, I'll use television, the technology, as an example. If imagine that if you had the power to distribute, that you are then allowed to distribute the worst of human nature and you make money from it. That is what surveillance capitalism shows, is that in the optimization, they bring out the worst of human nature and they profit off of it. So, sorry, I'll shut up because there are others, but it must stop.
Yeah. Go ahead. I have a quick question on the issue of profits. Would you have a sense, Maria, of exactly how much, for example, profits would be made on a given account, for example, of 5 million subscribers, and there are TV ads or there are commercial company ads being uploaded? Would you have a sense of how much? Because I understand. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to say, looking at those individuals, it's kind of like a system of laws, right? If we look at the people who are doing that, that doesn't actually help, because I think one of the things that we're doing is we're lost in the details, but we're allowing systemic harm to continue. And so, yes, there have been lots of people who have made a lot of money. There are digital outfits that are created to mislead. And this is really insidious manipulation. I think you saw a report in the last hearing that looked at how advertisers were taken, and a black ops operation has been created. But that's not really the problem. These are groups that are taking advantage of the weaknesses of a system to manipulate
Yeah.
people. So I think that's where you should. I can send the details in terms of how much revenues have grown, how much has been set aside to deal with these harms to real people. Essentially, the platforms continue to use surveillance capitalism, and then they blame the users. I've heard officers say, well, it's really human nature. That is just wrong. It is what the platforms have done is to create emergent human behavior that discounts empathy, that cuts out the goodness of human nature. And that's part of the reason we have shifted the world to fascism. This is a statistic from the Oxford University's Computational Propaganda Research Project. There are at least 81 countries around the world that are using information ops, cheap armies on social media to insidiously manipulate their people. We need like a better business bureau to protect us.
Yeah. On that point, maybe we can first get Shopee also because we're talking of the infrastructure, and part of the infrastructure is that based on the data that we have initially received, and we'd like this confirmed, about 27 billion pesos worth of digital ads were spent last year. So that's 27 billion pesos worth of ads going into all these various digital platforms, Google, Facebook, Meta, etc., YouTube, etc., and eventually it trickles or goes to all these accounts who monetize it and earn from it. So maybe we can hear from Shopee also. And I have some questions for Shopee and Lazada. Maybe Mr. Trinidad can answer this later on. Think about your answer. But pretty much you're saying that as soon as you know that your ads are placed in sites that are spreading this information, you ask them to take it down. Could we not take a step further, or be more proactive and already instruct those who are putting these placements that there is a negative list that you will not allow. Instead of reacting, it's more proactive to say, okay, give me sites that are providing all these disinformation, these lies, historical revisionism, etc., and we will make it corporate policy to stay away from these sites and put it to sites that are, that are consistent with our brand. Maybe that is something that can be done, but we can have that later. Maybe Shopee and Rockwell can proceed. Shopee, are you here? Please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Yes, good morning. That's Jem Hans.
Yes,
Yeah. Go ahead. You have the floor, ma'am.
thank you. Good morning.
Joining us.
Good morning, Senators Dulon, Senator Angara, Senator Marcos, Senator Binay, esteemed resource speakers. I'd like to introduce myself. I am Jem Han Segovia from the Public Affairs team of Shopee. We would like to thank this honorable committee for inviting us to participate in this discussion. Please allow me to read a statement to formally introduce our company and to provide a brief summary of our position on Senator Solution number 952.
Yes, go ahead. We already have your submission, but if you can focus on the highlights. Go ahead, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Shopee is an online platform that gives buyers and sellers the space to conduct transactions online. It plays a matching role in the transactions between sellers, many of whom are MSMEs, who are given an avenue to expand their reach across the country, and buyers who are given access to a myriad of products from the comforts of their homes. Since trust is integral to the growth of the e-commerce industry, Shopee aims to be a safe shopping environment for all its users and continuously works to improve its mechanisms to protect its users. In any case, Shopee does not condone misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, and mass deception using digital platforms, and this is reflected in several of our policies. Thus, in placing our advertisements in other online platforms or websites, it is our policy to opt out of groups of sensitive content, including those that contain hurtful language or words that could be considered biased, demeaning, or hate speech against certain groups. These types of content do not align with our brand and our values. So we would like to thank this honorable committee for bringing this matter to our attention, which is now being investigated by our internal teams. And we are exploring whether our advertising partners offer any additional controls regarding this concern. So as you already mentioned earlier, we have provided more details in our position
Yes.
paper, which we submitted to this committee. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you. This is Jamie, no? Jamie or Jem?
Yes.
Yeah.
My real name is Jamie, but you may address me as Jem, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Jem. We can now have Rockwell. Rockwell was present in the first hearing, but they had signal problems, and we asked them to go back online, but they were unable to. They were not present in the second hearing, but they're here now. Go ahead. Where is the Rockwell representative?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, esteemed senators and resource persons and all the attendees. First of all, I'd like to apologize for our absence from the first two hearings. Actually, yes, on the first hearing, we had technical difficulties. And on the second hearing, well, actually, it was just when we received the video clip of our ad, which was inserted in a vicious video clip in YouTube, that we understood our significance in this committee hearing. And so we are here to offer our explanation and to emphasize that it was not our intention to propagate the spread of that video clip or even to support that material. Please note that Rockwell Land values integrity and fairness, and we would not knowingly consent or condone vicious materials. And as a matter of policy, we would always have any material taken down by our partners. As you know, Rockwell Land is in the business of real estate, and it's not in the business of advertising or any publication. So we work with an agency, Ogilvy Matter Corporation, for its ads. And so we invited Ms. Santa Ana, Aide Santa Ana, the account officer, to be with us here to explain that, as pointed out by Ms. Reza, it was really our algorithm that has led our ad to be inserted in the vicious video clip. So if you would allow, we can have as our resource person also Ms. Santa Ana to explain the algorithm thing. Thank
Yes,
you. And thank you for inviting us.
yes. She may add, Miss. What is your last name, Carol?
Pinoy, Your Honor.
I'm sorry.
Pinoy, Your Honor. As in ako'y isang Pinoy.
Oh, okay. That's a very nice last name.
And Miss Aide Santa Ana is with us, Your Honor.
Yes, Miss Santa Ana can add, no, to what Carol has already said, and I placed on record earlier. We have a submission from Ogilvy, and we appreciate it. Please go ahead. The highlights of your inputs and your paper, Miss Santa Ana.
Thank you, sir. So good morning, everyone. I'm Adeline Santana. I'm from Ogilvy. So, Your Honor, based on the position paper that we submitted, I've detailed there how much control we have in where our ads appear. And as you will see, while we do have some control over where they will appear, we do not purposely target and place on channels and on videos that have malicious content or even content that is not aligned with Rockwell or Ogilvy's values. While we cannot do a detailed audit on where our ads appear, we do act swiftly in removing our ads if and when we have monitored our ads appearing in those types of content. So in my position paper, Your Honor, I've detailed there our
Yes.
targeting methods. Yeah. So just to reiterate, if we cannot do a detailed audit on where they appear. We can do an exclusion once we have monitored if they are appearing in malicious content. Thank you.
So in other words, again, like Lazada, you can only act on it after it has been aired, and not before. And that's something perhaps that we might have to look into, because there's somebody decides where it should be uploaded. No, I mean, or unless the decision is let the algorithms decide. But should not there be a negative list, for example? Yes, we want the algorithms to guide us, but there is a negative list. And in this list, please, whoever places these ads, don't. Otherwise, it'll harm also your brand. If in the previous hearing, one of the issues raised by the advertising agencies is precisely brand safety and brand security, protecting the brand. And therefore, I guess part of that then, therefore, is to ensure that your brand is not associated with garbage, for lack of a better term, di ba? So maybe that's something that we can all look into. If I may, just request the secretariat just to refreshen our memory in terms of what's happening in the ground. We do have another video, a very short video, just to can we have it presented, the secretariat? Because we're done with Lazada, Shopee, and Rockwell. Then we can go to MSAP, because MSAP, my understanding, would be the media specialist who actually place these ads. No? Okay.
May pruweba ako na lahat ng dilawan ay bayaran. Ito naging paninindigan ng influencer at TikTok superstar na si Jam Magno matapos nga niyang muling sagutin sa pamamagitan ng isang viral video ang ABS-CBN talent manager na si OJ Diaz. Kabila ng kanyang pagiging anti-government ay nanguna pa raw ito magpabakuna kesa sa mga frontliners sa Metro Manila.
Payday sale na! Add to cart na ng iba't ibang exclusive deals at mag-enjoy sa discounts, free shipping at cashback vouchers. Kaya i-check out mo na yan! Shopee!
Tony Lechon na kumampi kay Liza Soberano sa kanyang mga komento. May natatago palang lihim at bulok. Isiniwalat ng kapwa niya Dr. Dean.
Angel Locsin kakasuhan raw matapos masawi ang isang matanda dahil sa kanyang community pantry kung saan lumabag umano sa IATF protocols.
Si Cardo Dalisay, akala ko highway patrol na, hindi pala. Naaawa ako doon sa mga artistang nagsasalita pag walang script. Ang layo ng sinasabi. Halatang walang alam sa batas.
Marami kayong naloloko. O pag naloko kayo, mapapaniwala nyo, ano mangyayari? Na wala nang press freedom. Pangalawa, pinasara kayo kahit hindi naman kayo sarado. Na wala naman kayong nilabag na batas. Bakit nyo para kayong pinagtutulungan ng gobyerno? Hindi na tayo equal dahil nawala ang ABS-CBN. Pambira naman.
Thank you for that brief presentation. It's just reiterating that disinformation and monetization, of hate speech, of defamatory statements, is happening as we speak and is funded and monetized as we speak. So hopefully we can take guidance from the Makati Business Club, the Financial Executives Association of the Philippines, the Management Association of the Philippines, who are all concerned about disinformation. So maybe we can have some response from Lazada, Shopee. Would you like to add to the statements that you've already made, if you wish? But
Hi,
we're still,
yeah.
yes, go ahead.
Yes, yes, Your Honor. This is Neil Trinidad from Lazada. So I'd like to add further, Your Honor, that it is true. Brands like Lazada, as many other advertisers, brand safety is of utmost importance. We do not want our ads to appear in places that are unsafe for our brand. When we place an ad in the implementation stage of placing an ad on Facebook or on Google, we have the option to choose opt-out or exclusions. So we can choose to opt out on certain placements, whether it's via topic exclusions or content exclusions or even block lists or negative lists, where we do not want our ads to appear. So that very much is sort of something that brands and advertisers are, in a sense, in control of. However, that said, we rely heavily on digital platforms like Meta and Google and their algorithms to ensure that those brand safety exclusions are implemented. In that sense, we as brands do not have any further control after we have already selected our opt-outs or our exclusions. And that's why we rely on our partners to continue their efforts on screening malicious content and fake news. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. That's very interesting. That you rely on the platforms to help you execute, your opt-out,
Yep.
Your opt-out option in terms of sites that you feel are not consistent with your brand. So are we saying therefore that despite the opt-out option, it is not being, or it is not a foolproof, fail-safe process, and that the opt-out option at times is not exercised despite the agreement?
Yeah, so Senator, I believe that there's a lot of content that is constantly being uploaded on platforms like Facebook as well as Google. And I believe that the algorithm is a part that screens this content depending on certain tags of the content. So I believe that there are cases, as we have seen, where ads get placed in content that may have been indicated in these exclusion lists. So I think it needs to continue with the diligence of the platforms to screen these content that appears or is uploaded on their platforms.
I don't fully understand this, but it seems like the process is let the hateful, defamatory remarks come out, and then report it, and we will take it down. I mean, for the corporations as well as for the platforms. In other words, there is at least at this point, there is little proactivity, being proactive in that before they are even uploaded, they are already screened, and therefore there is no need to take it down because you already precisely chose to opt out. So are you saying therefore that the opt-out option is more on paper rather than in actual practice? I mean, because the opt-out option is you've done your part, right? That you have the company. You don't want to be associated with these negative sites, these sites that precisely come up with garbage. But then the ball is now with the platforms. to ensure, based on their knowledge of the algorithms, that these sites, that you stay clear of these sites. I mean, that's their obligation, right? Precisely why they're asking for your money. In return, they will also protect your brand by not allowing your ads to come out in these garbage sites. I mean, that's what I think. Theoretically, that's what I understand the arrangement to be. Tama ba yun? Is that right?
Hi, Your Honor. That is correct. As advertisers, we place our ads on these platforms to be able to reach our target audiences. The whole point of the brand safety is to make sure our brands do not appear in potentially libelous content. And as a responsible brand, we update our negative list on an ongoing basis. Negative lists, including channels which are associated with libelous content. So the role of brands is to be vigilant in ensuring that they, follow brand safety guidelines. They opt out of certain content where their ads may appear. But again, as with any advertiser placing on a platform, we do expect that the platform also continues to do their due diligence in ensuring that the opt-in guidelines are upheld.
Thank you for that clarification. And I go back to Ogilvy and Rockwell, no, because in the end, I guess my understanding here is that the advertiser and the agency, and I quote, did not purposely target viewers of Robin's Sweet Showbiz channel. This is where the libelous and defamatory remarks were present. The advertiser and agency likewise has no control over which channels or videos the individuals within its targeted audience would view or select. There seems to be also a major lack of transparency in that you also are not familiar with the processes of the algorithms in that regard, and leave it to the social media platforms or the media place, MSAP, to decide. Hindi ba? So parang we are, for lack of a better term, we are letting the machine take over our lives, and regardless of what the machine does, we will point to the machine and say, well, we have no control. In the meantime, these garbage sites are monetizing your money, your ad placements, and Google is earning from it. I mean, that's my understanding. Maybe Ms. Santa Ana, you might want to comment.
Your Honor, I would just like to clarify that last statement. So it says that while we do target these individuals based on their behavior, we don't necessarily have we don't have any visibility on what specific videos or channels they view. If you look at the targeting methods that I have detailed in the paper, it details there that it is based on interests, certain behaviors that are done on our website. So I do acknowledge what you've mentioned on having more specific accountability on where we will place our ads, and we will do our due diligence moving forward on this specific videos and channels. There, thank you.
Yes, I guess one of the questions we can raise in terms of legislation is if these sites are proven to be defamatory, can the companies that place ads in these sites be, can be fined? I don't know. That's something that has to be thought of thoroughly. But it's in that sense, and that's why I'd like to see the numbers too. How much does one site earn, and how much of your digital ad buy goes to those sites? How how are you unwittingly enabling? I'm not saying you're doing it consciously or you're doing it deliberately, because none of these corporations would want eventually this will bite us all back. You will have other companies with nefarious intentions, creating all these fake news about your brand, your company, your employees, etc. And we'll all be, it'll be chaos and anarchy and everybody attacking everybody. And where does it end? Robinson Land, Rockwell. You're a real estate company. What will I'm just looking at scenarios. What people or what others are willing to do just to bring you down in your company's name and the competition. I don't know. It's certainly happening in politics. Why shouldn't it happen in other fields? That disinformation, hate speech being employed to defeat or to push for your agenda. I'm sorry, I just wanted that out there. But hopefully we can sort this out. But more and more, I'm beginning to maybe we can hear the Meta. What do you say about the opt-out option that apparently may not be observed all the time?
Chair, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk. If you'll indulge me, I'll start by thanking you once again for having Meta. I've had the honor of meeting many of you in person.
We appreciate your patience and your cooperation. Thank you.
Absolutely. And to Ms. Reza, it's nice to finally meet you virtually, and of course, congratulations on your recent honor. I will start with just sort of some high-level remarks, and then in terms of Mr. Chair's specific questions, I'll ask my colleague Roy to address those. But I agree with Ms. Reza in that we're at sort of a humanity-level moment here. The challenges that are being faced in the Philippines regarding disinformation and fake news and propaganda and hate speech are certainly not unique to the Philippines, not unique to Asia, but unique now to all of humanity. And it's going to require a multi-sectoral response, which is why teams like mine exist at Meta, to have constant interaction with appropriate parties within the government, why we work so closely with civil society in the Philippines through our public policy teams and our safety policy teams, why we do have ads policies that Roy will talk about in a moment. I think we agree, and our CEO has said on the record that we're for responsible regulation of platforms like ours. And we are here to partner with you on crafting legislation like that to the extent that we're still welcome to do so. I'm proud to say that we're probably one of the few tech companies that will testify openly in the Senate that we want better access for Filipino authorities to address human trafficking and child exploitation. But we also don't want to be the arbiters of truth. That's not our role in society. This is why we employ services like Rappler to be our third-party fact checkers. When it comes to hate speech, we don't allow it. And quite frankly, the algorithms that we're talking about, there's nothing inherently evil about them. These are the same algorithms that helped hundreds of thousands of small businesses in the Philippines survive the pandemic. I think Lazada and Shopee would agree with that. These are the same algorithms that help our machine learning remove terror-related content in the Philippines. These are the algorithms that help keep children safe in the Philippines. But it is true that we have to continue to improve on them, which is why teams like mine exist, and our public policy team exists, and our safety policy team exists, so we can learn better the cultural contexts in which we're operating. In terms of offline, or as Ms. Reza calls it, online harm, we call it sort of off-platform harm. We do absolutely have policies against that. And Mr. Chair, you mentioned the concept of anonymity. When it comes to criminal offenses, appropriate authorities in the Philippines do have a way in which to get information from us. So there is a perception of anonymity that exists. But when it comes to criminal matters, and I think my colleagues with DOJ Office of Cybercrime would agree, there are laws in the Philippines that we honor, and we do disclose data when there's off-platform harm. We do have community standards against hate speech. We enforce those. but it has been acknowledged by all of us. We are a huge operation. And so when our failures or our shortcomings don't address a particular piece of content, that's why we have escalation channels from the government, from civil society, from appropriate agencies to bring them to us for quick evaluation and action as appropriate. So with that in mind and our sort of safety posture overall, I'd like to ask my colleague Roy to talk a little bit more about our ad-specific safety-related policies.
Go ahead, Roy. You have the floor.
Good morning, Senator. Good to see you again. So I want to talk specifically today a bit more about the ads. There were questions earlier about placements, about brand safety, and how we could exclude certain videos or certain ad buys in our platform. I think without going to like all the finer details, there are a lot of different potential placements on Meta platforms. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have our audience network, and even in all these different platforms, there are different kind of placements that you can actually place your ads in. So we have a few self-service tools that advertisers can use, and that includes agencies which support advertisers. Things like placement opt-outs, so people can opt out of placements in certain areas of our ad network. There's also topic exclusions, so certain topical areas which are not suitable or valid to that particular partner or a person who wants to place ads, they can exclude the topics, even content type exclusions. There's also block lists that people can tap onto. So if there are particular pages and publishers that they do not want to have their ads shown on, they can use the block list to do that. We also have what we call the publisher allow list. So in our audience network and in our Facebook in-stream videos, we have a list of publishers which are allowed to use these ads, and we actually share these lists to advertisers, and they can actually pick and choose if they want to exclude or include these publishers in with their ads. There's also content allow lists. So this is something new that we're actually rolling out across different countries. But it gives advertisers the ability to work with our certain trusted business partners to review and customize lists for brand suitable videos. So what it means is that, for example, you have children's ads or products that you want to advertise. You may only want to advertise on the child-friendly content, right? And so you can choose that on a whole list that we have. So that's one of the new tools coming out. And at the end of the day, we also have delivery reports where we can give you impression level data on what kind of publisher and content levels these ads were placed in. So we have quite a lot of self-service tools that brands can actually choose to exclude or include across our advertising network. But having said that, I also want to kind of mention that if there are publishers, if there are pages out there that violate our policies, more often than not, if they violate our policies multiple times, they are also restricted from having ads placed or from being able to place ads and having ads placed in the in-stream videos. They are also restricted from monetization. So earlier, there were some conversations about how these creators make money, and if they violate our policies, they will also be restricted from monetization. So that's also something that we look into on a regular basis. So just want to kind of cover that to ensure that yes, we do have brand safety controls that brands can actually use on their own self-service. Thank you.
Thank you. Would Google want to weigh in terms of the issue of brand safety and opting out and the like?
Thank you, Chairman. Let me just say a couple of words, and since we spoke at length during the last hearing, and I think, as we mentioned at the time, we have a number of policies and processes in place, and we invest considerably and continue to invest more to get it better and better. And we know there's always more that we can do to get better, whether it's on ads or generally on harmful content and misinformation. And we'll continue to improve. And we're grateful, in fact, for the feedback that we get regularly from various stakeholders, including from the Philippines, so that we continually improve. And it is a nuanced area. We have to be careful. We have to maintain this careful balance between being the internet being a place for free expression for people to express their opinions, but also making sure that we preserve user safety, that we make it a safe place. And so there's that constant balance, whether it's in our day-to-day or it's in legislation, for instance. I think we need to be mindful of getting that balance right. And a couple of points I would want to make just briefly, if I may, is if I can summarize the sort of vision, is to say that, look, first, yes, we strive to do better. On ads, we're talking about enormous scale. If I look at some of the figures we release every year, a summary of our ad safety, just to give you some figures, just to explain how big this is. Just in 2020, we removed 1.3 billion publisher pages. And we stopped ads being served on over 150,000 publisher sites. And I can go on with such numbers. So this is an area where we need to be as nimble as we can, but also deal with scale. So it's difficult, and so we need to continually improve, as other platforms do, whether it's to fight scams or protecting against misinformation. So that's ongoing, and we'll continue to improve. I think also at a general level, and I've made that point last time, but I want to really reiterate it here. I think we really believe that we need strengthened cooperation across the board at a practical level between stakeholders, whether it's government, the online platforms, the news ecosystem, civil society, both to counter bad actions like mis and disinformation and harmful content, but also to encourage quality content. And I think that's really where we want to focus our attention. So continuing to improve how we do things internally, how we craft our policies, refine them, create new policies to address new threats and new technology to do that as well, but also increasing cooperation, both to be more transparent, but also together to put in place, better coordination so we can tackle threats together, so that we can, raise user literacy and together have a long-term comprehensive plan to tackle these issues. Obviously, happy to go into more detail, but I might stop it for now, Senator.
Yes, thank you. Just to point out, in the last two hearings, Asia Brewery was with us. And the other company, Asia Brewery, and one more, I forget now, but they all expressed surprise that their ads were coming out in YouTube channels that were, notorious for disinformation. So, and they swiftly put their foot down and said, we're going to have them pulled out. So perhaps there has to be a stronger, precisely, stakeholder social media platform cooperation, so that they don't want their brand associated with disinformation and lies, and therefore it's to their best interest to have a stronger coordination with you, and vice versa. I'd like to think that. Okay, and thank you for that. We can now proceed with MSAP. The representative of MSAP is here. This is the media specialists. My understanding is that the incoming president, is that correct? MSAP?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, you're the incoming president, Mr. De Guzman. Go ahead. When are you taking your? When will you be officially the president?
My term starts this year. We are just to hold a formal induction.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted that on record because precisely some of the issues that were raised were for actions taken by last year's officers. Or at least Mr. De Guzman. Mr. De Castro. So go ahead, Mr. De Guzman. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Let me start off, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Senator Pangilinan, Honorable Senator Dulon, the honorable members of this committee, other resource speakers, and all the other attendees. So good morning. First off, allow me to apologize in behalf of MSAP and my colleagues present here for not being able to attend the past hearings. We will provide the written explanation that you requested as soon as possible. If I may be allowed to,
Go ahead.
sir, if I may be allowed to read our opening statement, since it's our first
Yes,
time
please,
to.
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. The Media Specialist Association of the Philippines, or MSAP, the Industry Association of Advertising Media Agencies, fully supports the Honorable Philippine Senate in the conduct of this hearing to review existing legislation amidst the rise of digital media and social media platforms in the country. MSAP is a non-profit organization of advertising media agencies, and we strive to be the leading partner organization in driving business growth for brands, media agencies, and consumers. Our principles include the promotions of the rights and interests of our members in conducting the business of advertising media practitioners, to set the standards of advertising media excellence, ethics, and accountability, and to foster an industry culture of advertising media creativity and innovation. While the advent of digital and social media has brought about many benefits to the Filipino people, such as connectedness and e-commerce, these also carry disadvantages given improper use, resulting in issues such as fake news and scam transactions. The advertising media industry, as well as the broader marketing communications industry, are experiencing and are continuing to adjust to the exponential rise of digital and online platforms, now overtaking the formerly dominant traditional TV, radio, and print media. In the conduct of our business, in serving our advertiser clients, and in partnership with media networks, MSAP member agencies adhere to fair and responsible distribution of advertising information to the public. As part of the Advertising Standards Council, or ASC, the nonprofit organization that promotes truth in advertising through self-regulation of advertising content, in partnership with relevant government bodies, we affirm our commitment to the code of ethics of the advertising industry. We are one with the other industry associations such as PANA, 4A's, KBP, and IMAP in regulating our business and practices to ensure that the welfare of the general public is protected. MSAP reiterates its commitment to support the objectives of this honorable committee by providing any assistance and information that may contribute to a better understanding of the media landscape and the advertising media business in order to review legislation in light of the current prevalence of digital technology. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. De Guzman. We will raise some questions after we get also the presentation of PANA. This is their first time to attend. Is PANA on board?
Yes, we are.
Go ahead. Do you have a prepared statement or a position paper? I understand we don't have one, or I don't have a copy, if you did submit one.
We have not, because this is our first time to attend. We wanted to have more time to understand, but definitely this is May Yao Kosai. I'm the incoming PANA president, but we'll still be inducted this January 27. We just wanted to take time to thank you for the invitation, and just wanted to initially inform you that all of our member advertisers adhere to the ASC, or the Ad Standards Council, which PANA is also an actively participation of ASC, to ensure all communication materials are backed up with authentic information. But since this is our first time to attend, we'll probably need more time to submit our formal position paper, but rest assured we are one and in very much appreciation with the group's effort to stop disinformation. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. What is your Ms. Yao? No, Ms. Yao.
Yes, Yao. Yeah.
Okay. We would appreciate a position paper on the issues that have been tackled in today's or in the last three hearings. If you need any material from the Secretariat, please feel free to request the same, and we will await your position paper. May we now have ASC, the Standards Council. Are they present?
Yes, Your Honor, we're present.
Please, do you have a position paper?
We don't have a position paper, Your Honor. We were just invited this week. However, I can make a statement, Your Honor, if you would
Please,
allow me.
go ahead.
The Ad Standards Council, Your Honor, is formed for the purpose of promoting truth in advertising. However, it is focused on content, and it has no control over the platforms over which our members place their advertising materials. So we just screen the materials on the basis of content and whether they conform to law and the code of ethics that we have. Beyond that, we do not already control our members insofar as the platforms are concerned. We encourage our member platforms to abide by our code of ethics, such as the KBP, which is composed of broadcasters of the Philippines, some print media. So they are encouraged to, or they are enjoined to conform with our ethics. And if advertising material that is not approved by ASC is attempted to be placed in their platforms, they should not allow it. Means to say these platforms, but these are limited basically to traditional media and owned media. So we do not have control over placements in social media platforms.
Yes.
May I also say something in behalf of the KBP, Your Honor, as I represent KBP also?
Go ahead, please.
Insofar as KBP is concerned, Your Honor, we support truth in advertising. We support the fight against false and malicious information. And we are inclined to support making social media platforms accountable, just like traditional media, so that we are put on an even playing field with social media platforms. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you for the position of the KBP. I think based on the presentations of PAN, or at least the comments of PANA and the ASC, as well as the inputs of the 4As in the last hearing, it looks like there seems to be a gap when it comes to social media platforms. And while we are limited to content of the ads, except that these ads, when placed in YouTube channels that are notorious for disinformation, are therefore monetized by these channels, and therefore indirectly, enabling disinformation. So there seems to be a gap in that area. For example, would it be fair to say that when an ad is delivered through a website or news site or a YouTube channel that's notorious for disinformation, does not the brand, for example, inadvertently support and enable disinformation?
That's the perception that will result from such placement. In fact, that's also true with traditional media. There are some advertisers that don't want to place in certain programs that they perceive to be propagating falsehood.
Yes.
So it also happens in traditional media.
Or even if it's not falsehood, if it's not consistent with the brand security or the branding or the imaging.
Yes, Your Honor.
And therefore, so really there seems to be, and precisely because social media is a new phenomenon, it's been around for like just maybe a decade and a half. It looks like the code of conduct or code of ethics of all your organizations will have to be revisited so that you can come up with a new set of an entirely new maybe chapter for social media alone, considering that really the shift in digital technology and digital media has already, the exodus, for lack of a better term, is taking place. And there has to be rules or parameters within which to operate. Like I said in the first hearing or the second hearing, I'm sure the 4As didn't have their code of conduct in the beginning. They didn't have their code of ethics in the beginning, and they realized the need for it as the industry grew. and as the industry progressed. So we're probably in that situation when it comes to social media. That as it as it progresses, as it develops, you need to put in place a new set of a code within which advertising agencies, media placement agencies, etc., will have to operate. Otherwise, it's going to be like this. It seems to be a bit schizophrenic. The 4A's is so strict. Your code of conduct is so clear as to truth, and yet your ads you produce the truth in your content, and yet your ads enable disinformation. So it's there seems to be some schizophrenia there. Would you agree, attorney?
Yes, Your Honor. In fact, to add to that, even traditional platforms are already finding themselves in social media platforms. To be competitive, for example, a radio station must do its own streaming on social media, Facebook Live, YouTube,
Yes.
etc. So the KBP is now in a review situation. We're reviewing our code to include the streaming on social media and podcast of our anchors, etc.
Yes, and you mentioned that. I guessed that in what is your segment or episode in Rappler? There's a term for it, and my reservation is that it's a magnet for trolling. The comment section, it's like, it's interesting, and I was sharing this, I think, with Mara, if I'm not mistaken. I told her, isn't it like you have a show, you have an episode, you have a program in your company, and as you invite me to speak, you also allow anyone. For example, it's a TV show, it's a TV station. I'm guesting in a TV show. I'm in the studio, and yet, as I'm being interviewed, the TV show allows for people to come in and throw garbage at me as you conduct the interview. It doesn't make sense in that regard. And how do you manage that? It's your show, it's your episode. You do live streaming, and then there's an organized, orchestrated intervention that throws garbage at your show and your guests. Who would want a guest? It's and therefore information precisely becomes victimized in that regard. In the last 5.5 years, I've suffered. My family has suffered. And I said this in the beginning. My daughter has been accused of, has been threatened with rape and death. My daughter has been subjected to, all these suggestions of, self-harm. Precisely, and it's and that's me. Can you imagine the ordinary folk? Anyway, we now have the 4A's has already given their position paper. Am I not? Unless I don't recall correctly. Did
Yes,
they not?
Mr. Chair, we have you, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for joining us. You may wish to chime in as you. We now proceed with the DOJ. Yes. Earlier we were talking about the absence of Section 230. That's in the U.S. Decency Act. I forget the communications. Can we have is it correct to say, therefore, in our setting, I believe that was already established, but I just wanted to reiterate it, that the social media platforms can be considered as publishers. Do we have the DOJ with us?
Yes, Your Honor. I am State Counsel Anthony Pauline Pascual from the Office of Cybercrime, Department of Justice.
Go ahead.
Sir, at the outset, the DOJ conveys its support to the resolution. But regarding the Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, I think the publishers or the service providers are not held accountable for the content that are posted on their platforms, because the authors are not them per se, but the authors themselves, the one who posted them. And in our jurisdiction, who the ones who are made liable for those content or for those comments are the authors only. So regarding the Senate resolution at hand, we support this resolution, which seeks to update the present pertinent laws to adapt to the current cybercrime landscape. Despite such support, we submit also that there is a Section 6 of the current cybercrime law, or RA 10175, or the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012, that although created at a time when social media platforms and applications were still smaller than what they are today, we are of the opinion that it is inclusive enough to cover manners but by which cybercrimes are committed to, and broad enough to apply to cybercrimes that may be committed in the future. So it is also our position that that the existing law on cybercrime, which is technologically neutral in letter, they already address current and future advancements in technology. At any rate, it is respectfully recommended that the focus should be on strengthening of the enforcement actions and compelling compliance of internet service providers with their obligations under the law. So these undertakings will effectively address the challenges in investigating and prosecuting cybercrime and cyber-related offenses.
What about, ma'am, what about on the matter of, rather than criminal penalties, just administrative fines, or for social media platforms that have, that have allowed defamatory or, of course, cybercrime, child pornography, etc. How does that work?
Sir, that is also an option, but for it to be effective, they should be they should have yung parang ngipin ba na the fine should be hefty for them not to for them to be compelled to not do it again, or not do again the action that they were fined for.
Yeah, just to place it out there, a former official of Facebook in the Philippines described Facebook as in the context of child pornography and child trafficking, that it was a crime scene. It is a crime scene. The trafficking happens, and of course, I understand, and the Facebook Meta has already said this, even in previous hearings of the Committee on Women, that they are actively, precisely coordinating with the DOJ and the NBI to address this. But it's just worth mentioning because, correct me, the data is still there, no? That the Philippines is still number 1 or number 3 in child trafficking and child prostitution in the world. Is that not correct?
Sir, we have received numerous reports, but these are reports from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So what happens is that service providers in the United States are mandated to report incidents of child pornography or online sexual exploitation of children when there are child sexual exploitation materials that passes through their platforms.
Yes,
So in
yes.
fairness to Facebook, when we place a preservation request on their portals, they would accede to this request to preserve these data. But then again, disclosure is another matter. So for that, we still need to acquire a valid warrant for disclosure for them to disclose the data that they have preserved pursuant to that preservation request on matters of child pornography or child exploitation only, sir, because I think they have a different view on libel. If
Yes.
libel be uh if it's a libel case, it's a different
Yes.
matter if it's a libel case.
Defamation cases are very different from child pornography
Yes, sir.
or other criminal offenses. Understood.
Yes.
Okay. We before
Mr.
we
Chair,
ask, yes.
Mr. Chair, the committee was informed that Ms. Maria Ressa needs to go, and if she can say a few words before she leaves the meeting, sir.
Okay, okay. We can accede to that request. Go ahead, Maria.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and for having me here. I think just three things that we haven't mentioned is that, gosh, there's so much, but genocide. The violence is very real. Genocide in Myanmar, that was both Facebook and the United Nations have sent people to Myanmar, and we now know where Myanmar is, right? So there has been no accountability for that. And part of the reason that's been the case, and this connects to the last 2 points, is that Meta, Facebook, now at almost 3 billion users, right, actually gives anyone outside the United States or Europe a far more dangerous platform than the rich countries. And this came from the Francis Haugen documents. So these are internal documents of Facebook. One document actually said that 87% of Facebook's global budget for time spent on classifying disinformation and misinformation goes towards the United States, so almost 90%, while only 13% is set aside for the rest of the world, despite the fact that North American users, make up just 10% of its daily users. So I think part of our asks for elections should be greater resources spent. It's AI, which Facebook constantly says is what it uses, struggles with non-English languages. It's part of the reason that detection is quickly subverted by switching to a dialect. And then finally, the last part, which goes back to how we started, is that conspiracy theories about elections, and this is a lesson we learned from the United States, from Facebook's own internal documents, that they actually allowed disinformation about Stop the Steal, right? It was classified as harmful but non-violating content. And that's extremely problematic because it allows conspiracy theories and even vaccine hesitancy to continue, right? So again, with something like this, and I'll place it in the context of a development just the last 2 days, I think, Mr. Chair, you released a statement about the potential Comelec hack that Comelec says didn't happen, but is being broadcast by some other candidates and known disinformation influencers as a way to already begin to seed distrust of our electoral process. And I'll leave it with that, right? There are no guardrails for this. I'd be happy to help any other way. We have the data for you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Maria. We appreciate your presence, and we will continue to coordinate with the Rappler, the office, as we craft the report on this resolution and this committee hearings. We will also allow Lazada, Shopee, and Rockwell, considering that we have raised a number of questions already with them. If they have, we can let them go, and we thank them for their participation. Unless they have a few more words before we proceed. Shopee, Lazada, and Rockwell. If there are no, additional inputs, we thank Rockwell, we thank Shopee, and we thank Lazada for your time, and we hope we will continue to coordinate with your offices, respective offices, so that we can together come up with a report that will help all of us address this issue of disinformation. Maraming salamat. We can now proceed. I think we can continue as we excuse a number of our resource persons. With Meta. Meta, you were raising your hand.
Yes,
Rob, go ahead.
Chair. Thank you very much once again for your time. I just want to add a few key points here regarding the fact that there is no code of conduct at Meta. That's grossly inaccurate. Just to be frank, we have a very extensive and transparent list of community standards that we enforce. And without sounding like I'm deflecting anything, I think all of us who work in cyberspace, which is everyone on this call, we all know that Facebook's family of apps, Meta's family of apps, we are a mainstream service. People like me exist and Roy exists, and you can come and talk to us anytime. A big threat in general is the use of the dark web to spread disinformation and to spread harmful content. So that's something that needs to be addressed just in general by all of us. That's a comment for which I have no solution, of course. Just to DOJ's point, we are responsive to Filipino legal process. And I just want to follow up by saying it's unfortunate that up until recently, it's been the Philippines law that requires a cyber warrant in matters of child exploitation. And that limits the nimbleness of police to pursue those who seek to harm children in the Philippines. So we at Meta have been actively advocating for revision of those laws to bring the Philippines more in line with the modern realities of how the internet is used to exploit children. And so there can be an extrajudicial process for access to basic subscriber information. So I do want to say that I'm very proud of our work in that space and our work with the Senate and with the House in that space. And I'm very proud of our collaboration with the DOJ OCC in general and with the Philippines law enforcement infrastructure in general. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Rob, again. And please don't get me wrong. The code of conduct that I was referring to was for the advertising agencies, the media specialists, primarily the 4As, the Ad Standards Council, the PANA, the local community of advertisers.
Yes, sir. I just want you to know that we do enforce our own codes of conduct, and such codes, of course, just don't exist on the dark web. So
Yes.
you have a direct line to our company, but to places like 4chan and 8chan and the non-mainstream part of the internet is a far bigger challenge for all of us who want to address cybercrime.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We now go to the PCOO. Wait, before sige, PCOO. Is Yusek Ablan? There you are. You're one of the early birds. Please, do you have a position paper and statement?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to all Senate members of this committee. We fully support the Senate resolution on countering disinformation by amending our laws, Mr. Chair. That is insofar as we are concerned. Thank you.
Okay. I go back to the DOJ very quickly. With respect to the complaints of cybercrime, would you have data as to cases being filed? Meron ho ba kayong information? How many complaints has the office of received in relation, to crimes done through social media?
Sir, the DOJ, Office of Cybercrime, receives reports from its provincial prosecutor provincial offices and all prosecution offices monthly. So we do have a database on that, on cybercrime that has been filed with their offices. Let me just include that in the position paper that we will be submitting as soon as it gets approved, sir. So
Yes,
we will be
please.
sending
Yes.
your office a copy of the position paper as well of the data that you have been requesting.
Yes, and if you can include in the data of those cases filed, how many were done through, fake accounts, or accounts whose handlers or owners are unidentifiable, at least on its face. No?
Sir, I think our data would only be limited as to the number of cases that have been filed and for what offense. But as to whether they were committed via social media, I don't think we have access to that, sir. Unless there are only complaints, of those that were only filed with our office and not with the prosecutor's offices.
Kahit nasa Office of Cybercrime, we'll be happy with that. And then maybe you can request we can request the Secretariat, the Committee Secretary, to request that directly kay Secretary Guevara
Yes, sir.
if we can have the data. Is there a mechanism that the Cybercrime Office observes or follows when fake accounts are involved?
Sir,
Or unidentifiable accounts in terms of criminal libel or criminal cybercrime?
Sir, most of the time when these perpetrators would be committing cybercrime, they would most likely use fake accounts. So in order to address that, we still need to refer them to the appropriate law enforcement authorities for further investigation, as we cannot file a complaint against unknown individuals, as most likely it would be dismissed.
So what happens there? What happens there? The NBI steps in, right?
The
And then,
NBI, yes, sir, or the
and then
PNP anti-cybercrime group, sir.
and then they deal with the social media platforms. Is that right? Like YouTube or Facebook. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So how does that work with YouTube, for example, or with Facebook? Have they actually handled? Maybe Facebook can answer and YouTube.
I'm very happy to answer that, sir. We are responsive to legal process from the Republic of the Philippines. They come usually from the Office of Cybercrime at DOJ on behalf of PNP. We receive them through what's called our law enforcement portal, and without getting too sort of in unnecessary detail, law enforcement can preserve data in an automated and easy fashion without legal process, which is what PNP usually does. And then DOJ secures the cyber warrant, and then we disclose data when it's lawful and appropriate. Yeah. And just to re-emphasize, it is our sincere hope that PNP will no longer need a warrant for basic subscriber information in matters of child exploitation and trafficking. But the short answer is yes, we are responsive to Philippines' legal process.
And you've had cases actually of precisely turning over the information to the
absolutely.
PNP. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Would YouTube still be around? Google?
We are around, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. How does that work with YouTube? If the accounts are unidentifiable or they have no, there are no names, how does that work with YouTube?
So we'll be able to go through a process. Indeed, normally going through an MLAT procedure, so an international bilateral procedure. But this is an area where we're also investing at international level. We need to find better solution and more streamlined solution because it can take time. I have to admit, and that's also why we don't want to wait, indeed, for formal investigations. So as much as we can, we try to take action under our own policies and community guidelines, if we can, in cases like this, at least to try and remove the bad content before going after the actual bad perpetrators. But this is an area where there has been a bit of work internationally, between governments and other stakeholders to try and find better ways, faster ways. This has sped up in recent years. So I'm hoping we're going to get to a situation where we do get to a better stage. But we do need a lot of work at the international harmonization level. And this is very much where actually, platforms and other stakeholders can help. But this is a government-to-government area as well. So I think that's certainly something which the elected authorities and the elected officials and government agencies can do a lot in terms of international cooperation. That's why very much we would, I think, as an industry, welcome the public sector being active and in progressing international discussion in this area. Thank you.
Would you care to comment, DOJ? In terms of your coordination with Google and, you've already mentioned Facebook or Meta.
I agree, sir, that they have been very responsive when we have been when we give them or when we send requests for preservation. But as I have mentioned earlier, disclosure of such data that have been requested to be preserved is another matter, because we are also constrained by our laws that we do need a warrant for disclosure of computer data before such data can be disclosed to us.
In other words,
So I think
in other words, it's like a chicken and egg situation. You don't know the guy, and therefore you can't file a case, but you can't identify the person. How do you issue the warrant?
Perhaps I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, to interrupt. Perhaps I can just clarify, because
Yes.
I understand why this seems like it's confusing. So when a production order is attached to a search warrant in the Philippines, it comes to us not for an individual, but for an account. So at that point, the probable cause has been established, as you would know, and signed by a judge and submitted to us. Okay. Facebook, just like any other provider, is just one step in the process. So we provide basic subscriber information, which would include information like session IDs and IP log-on, log-off information that the PNP or NBI or whichever law enforcement is lead would have to then take to the Filipino ISPs and say who is using this computer and when.
Yes.
So this is an exceptional challenge in the Philippines because, as you know, many of our Filipino community of users use internet cafes with shared machines, which is why we sincerely hope at Meta that the laws will be made such that the police, relevant authorities can be far more nimble in getting information when it comes to child exploitation and trafficking. So just in general, we are one step in the process. And this is something I've worked when I was a government employee and now here at Meta. We are one step in the process. I hope that clarifies a little bit. So the chicken and the egg part, I absolutely understand that metaphor, but what we disclose as the information we do have, and whether or not that ties to an actual human being, that's up to PNP or NBI or DOJ, etc.
Yes, I understand. It would help a lot if precisely if the identities of these individuals are kept on record by Google or Meta, and that when it is when a crime is involved, criminal activities involved, then those identities can be made available to law enforcement. I mean, that's something that we're looking at in terms of being able to pinpoint liability, which was earlier mentioned by the minority leader, in terms of disinformation, criminal cybercrime, and the like. you'd like to have. For example, if it was a child pornography site, you'd like to have a name, someone who registered that, and put it up.
So
Not hide.
in terms of the basic subscriber information that we're able to disclose under US law and Philippines law, that would include the user's registration email, the user's registration IP address, and then also whether or not these are verified. So if they have something like two-factor authentication turned on, that can help police narrow their scope. But of course, when it comes to enforcing on the ground, that's obviously up to the PNP and the NBI. The information that we do have, we can share when lawful and appropriate.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. We now proceed with PCOO. Yusek Ablan, may we know how many personnel or plantilla handle the PCOO social media accounts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have various social media accounts for our various programs. I would take that number to around not more than 20 po at the PCO proper. We have around 20 more or less who are handling our social media accounts.
Yes. You have a social media, you have 19 COS, is that right, in the plantilla?
Yes. I will verify that, Mr. Chair, but I think your numbers are correct.
Yeah.
As of 2021.
Yes. Do you have a PCOO policy on beyond office hours sidelining work? Social media pages outside of what is controlled and managed by the PCOO. I guess, kumbaga nagsa-sideline at gumagawa ng ibang nagra-racket sa labas. I mean, there are government employees or government, they're
We do have a social media policy at the PCOO, Mr. Chair, governing our employees and officials. Basically, the social media policy sets the parameters on setting up a social media page for PCOO, as well as the responsibilities of our employees and officials, Mr. Chairman. But we don't have a policy for what they do outside of government work hours, sir.
Yes. So you confirmed the earlier manifestation of Maria Ressa that the PCOO trained with Russia Today, the news agency of the Russian Republic.
No, Mr. Chair, we do not have a ongoing program, or we never had a program with the Russia Today. We do have an existing memorandum of agreement with the our counterpart in the Russian Federation, as much as we do have counterpart agreements with other governments who handle state media, but we do not have a program or ever had a program with Russia Today. What we do have, Mr. Chair, is a collaboration with Sputnik. It is the official news agency of the Russian Federation, and their counterpart here in the Philippines is the Philippine News Agency. That is insofar as our programs with the Russian Federation, Mr. Chairman.
Were you also vaccinated with Sputnik? No, just kidding. That's that's a levity. Putting some levity into the discussions. Okay. We did have some material that we're still going through, Yusek Ablan, no? We had I think this was requested during the budget deliberations. Were you able to submit the requests of the Finance Committee? Sorry, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We were able to submit the documents required from us from the Minority Floor Leader during the budget defense last year, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir.
Okay, and if you still have copies of these. We would also, in this committee, appreciate the submission so that we can be guided accordingly.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we will submit to this committee.
Okay. At this point, we have no more question. We have no questions as we go through the documents. Yusek Ablanzo, I hope you can be present in the next hearing, which is to be scheduled. I have no other questions at this time. And unless there are others who would like to make additional manifestations, the KBP is also, well, we're almost done. So unless there are other points that need to be placed on record, we have no other questions at this time. We will reschedule another hearing and we will coordinate with your respective offices regarding the next hearing. In the meantime, there being no other matters to discuss in today's hearing, this hearing of the Committee on Constitutional Amendments is suspended, and we'd like to thank everyone for their presence and their cooperation and their patience. Maraming salamat. At magandang umaga. Thank you, and please stay safe. This Omicron variant is nasty and really about more than half of my staff are either positive, exposed to a positive person, or experiencing symptoms and waiting for test results. So it's really, it's no joke. Please, everyone, please take care, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you, and this hearing is suspended. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much.